Hello readers, welcome back to PJL Books and welcome to today's Off the Shelf. Today the topic is going to be the intrusive author. Now, the intrusive author is a pretty old-fashioned literary device where the narrator, who may or may not be the author itself, but for the sake of simplicity, let's take the narrator and the author as one here, they step in and begin lecturing the reader. You've all read books that have a passage that begins with "Dear Reader" or something to that effect, I imagine. Now, that kind of very direct step-in fell out of favour in the 19th century, and rightly so. It would be like watching a movie now, where the video stops and the director butts in with some unsolicited commentary. It breaks that immersive hold an otherwise good story should have. If you see any book penned in the 21st century doing this, I strongly suggest you snap that book shut straight away and run away screaming. No, that kind of intrusion has all but disappeared, but there's a more deceptive style of intrusion that seems to have taken its place, where the author's own personal opinions and thoughts are so obvious to the reader that it's just as intrusive and illusion-breaking as just outright addressing the reader. Let me give you an example. In my most recent showcase, I talked about The Terrible Seven Ancient Wonders by Matthew Riley. One of his prime failings in terms of pure writing craft is how his action is so void of weight and genuine peril that, rather than addressing that problem within the narrative, he throws all of his energy into the style of the narrative itself, using fully capitalized sentences, overuse of exclamation marks, and the infamous diagrams of rooms to help the reader visualize the setting. Through this, Riley's penning hand becomes all too blatant. He wants you, dear reader, very clearly to know just how intense, exciting, and action-packed these scenes are. But that's the problem. Because Riley puts his energy into making his own wishes of what he wants you, the reader, to feel clear, you as the reader don't end up actually feeling that way he wants you to, but instead you end up with a very clear vision of an author scrambling to manipulate your emotions. And we, like normal rational human beings, despise having our emotions manipulated overtly. It's the writing equivalent of those aggressive charity hawks on the high street who will try desperately to corner you and ask you loaded questions like, "Are you interested in helping the blind?" Now, wait a moment, you might be thinking, well, how do I get my point across to the reader then? I want my book to have a certain message, so how do I make that clear without being intrusive? Well, let me be blunt here, dear writer. Not a single reader cares what you think. I'm sorry, but it's true. If you want readers to listen directly to your voice and share your thoughts and opinions on things, then you should get into journalism or make a blog. But as a fiction writer, your creation takes front and center stage. You as the writer shouldn't even make an appearance. You should be working backstage to keep things moving. Your only moments where you can indulge your own presence are on the front cover, where you have your actual name, perhaps a short 100-word bio on the front sleeve, and maybe a special thanks before the narration begins. In the story itself, you as the author should be omnipresent and ambivalent. Now, to this, you could argue that there are many great books out there where the author's intentions are very clear. I mean, who here was left in any doubt about Philip Pullman's religious opinion after reading the His Dark Materials trilogy? But if you were to reread any of those books, you'll notice that the author never pushed the plot aside, Riley style, and said, "This is how I want you to feel." Instead, they get their point across via a character who is a vessel for experiencing whatever the narrator wishes the reader to also experience. In Northern Lights, aka The Golden Compass, Philip Pullman has Lyra experience the dogmatism of religion and belief through her own adventures to the deep north. However, it's done with a lightness of touch. If the reader chooses to just ignore the messages, they can easily do so and simply enjoy the adventure. Wally is also a great example of this. You may recall there being a big debate about whether the movie WALL-E had an environmental agenda, but both sides of the argument were right. The messages at no point are forced upon the reader, because that would be breaking the motivations of the characters and would be exposing the author's own opinions. Again, it was a case of take it or leave it. If you wanted to glean such messages from WALL-E, then you will find a movie that poses some pretty dark questions. If not, then you will find a delightful, simple story of two robots falling in love. However, director Andrew Stanton is very careful in making sure that the budding romance between WALL-E and Eve stays central to the story, while everything else revolves around that. After all, it's always story first, messages second. So, my dear writers, while nobody may care what you think, if you've done your job right, then they will fall in love with your characters and care about their thoughts. But again, be wary of intruding too much into the story with your own opinions. You are of the real world, and if you intrude either directly or put too much weight into the style of narration to overtly manipulate the emotions from the reader, that breaks the illusion of the fictional world you have created. And who wants that? And that's it for today's Off the Shelf. Thank you very much for listening, readers. The written version of this is going to be on my website, the link of which is in the description below. So take a look over there to read that and many more other posts for Off the Shelf. Thank you very much for listening, readers, and see you next time. Bye bye.